So if you've been thinking, wait, what? Rollo is the father of Bjorn? Well, don't worry, I'll cover that theory, everything around it, what that means for the characters, whether it's true or not, plus some of the other stuff we see happening with Ivar, Harold, Lagertha, Bjorn, and all the other characters in this review. So stay tuned. So this half season starts off quite slow compared to where we were just in the last episode. They really use this time to try and slow down the pace of the show, make sure we know who is in command, what power they've got, where everyone lies with each other, so we have a nice foundation to work off as everyone picks their sides, gets their armies together, and hopefully clash in one epic conflict at the end of the season. It was interesting to see right off the bat how they contrasted everyone being happy and like getting into brawls and drunk and laughing, with Harold kind of brooding by himself, still very much affected by his brother's death. We see Ivar relishing the chance to actually stand up while he's peeing, something that he probably hasn't experienced his whole life. But the celebrations don't last too long because Rollo decides to rock up in person, something that greatly dismays both Ivar and Harold, as they were quite happy with the arrangement of him not coming in person and just sending his very useful men. It's very clear that Rollo has changed immensely to be very much a lord. He's clearly trying to consciously put in an effort to try and seem more casual and laxed and more like he was when he was a Viking, but as soon as he starts mentioning favourable trade agreements, you can see how the many years of him being a lord has really affected the way he thinks. From all the somewhat awkward interactions we get with Rollo and the others, it's very clear that none of them really value each other at all as allies. They only got together for this one thing and they don't really understand each other's motivations, and Rollo doesn't care for them at all. Except for maybe Viksid, but Viksid's kind of just doing his own thing here. So now we cross over to where Bjorn, Lagertha, Hickman, Uber, all the rest are hiding out and trying to decide what they're going to do now that they've been pushed out of Kattegat. Bjorn's still very much high emotion. He wants to get back into the fight, he wants an army, he wants to throw out Ivar and take back his home. Lagertha's more focused on her legacy at this point. She doesn't want to go down as the failed chick who couldn't mount her own success. She always wanted to prove herself by herself. She didn't want to be some side person to another Carl or Ragnar or anyone. She was wanting to go her own path and have her own power by her own right. And so now they've been put in this desperate situation, something that Rollo really wanted them in, because Rollo thought he could use this point, this place where they're at their brink, to use that to try and convince them to do something they wouldn't want to do at all. Go to Normandy and get protected by him, so he could get Lagertha, so he could get Bjorn, his son, back, and get all the things he always dreamed of in his life. But he didn't know is that Hickman went in first. Hickman used the same opportunity of desperation to try and get them to come back to England, something they would normally never think of. It's a silly plan with high risks, but it's their only option at this point. For a lot of us, it was very confusing Rollo's motivations for everything he did. Why was he backing Ivar? But if we understand that he believes Bjorn is his son, and that he still loves Lagertha and wants her at his side, then we can see somehow how his brain worked, how he thought that he could put them in this really precarious spot where he could take advantage of that, where he could confront them on his own terms, where he's got all the power, and say, no, I'm putting my foot down, you are my son now, I'm claiming you now that Ragnar's gone. So the question becomes, why does he think Bjorn is his son? And I'll explain that now. When Ragnar told the tale of how he won over Lagertha, he said that he had to get past two guards, a great bear and a hound. Some people have theorized that the bear represents Rollo and the hound represents Lagertha's father. There is a lot of points throughout this entire series that signifies Rollo as the bear.
He is the brother of King Ragnar. He fights like a crazy bear.
And I also see that the bear will be crowned by a princess.
But I will not be tied in holy matrimony to someone who is more beast than man.
So it's possible that Lagertha was in a very special relationship with Rollo before Ragnar even came into the picture, but Ragnar won her over, besting his own brother, not knowing that they were really that far along in any kind of relationship at that point. So in that transition point where Ragnar was kind of winning over Lagertha, but Rollo was still with her, that's where one of them conceived Bjorn. And in an age with no DNA testing, there's no real way to figure that out or not. So Rollo just had to go with characteristics and how he fought, and he tried to bond with him to see if he was his son, and he's clearly convinced himself that Bjorn is. This love triangle between Rollo, Lagertha, and Ragnar, the dispute over whether Bjorn was his son or not, and all this other stuff laid the foundation for the tension in their brotherly relationship that lasted throughout all of the first 4 seasons. And now that Ragnar is completely out of the picture, Rollo thought it was his chance to swoop in and take everything he'd fought for his entire Viking life. So is Bjorn really Rollo's son? Maybe. There's no real proof to know either way. But who's your father biologically doesn't nearly matter as much as who raises you as your dad. And that was clearly Ragnar. So by all accounts, Ragnar is Bjorn's father. So Rollo, knowing where they'll hide out, finds them, seeks them out, and makes his offer, thinking that they're in a point that they might actually take it. Bjorn is so hot and angry from the battle and the betrayal. He hates Rollo for defeating Ragnar and crushing his spirits and really taking everything out of him in the last parts of his life. He's confused by this truth and wants to reject it, so all of that emotion culminates to him just wanting to hurt Rollo the best way possible. And the best way is not to get angry or to strike him down or to acknowledge him as his father at all, but rather to spite him and disown him and forget about him. After they throw his offer back in his face, he turns to Lagertha and says, "We will never meet again." The whole reason he backed Ivar, the whole reason he came here in the first place, was to try and make that offer. So now that's gone, he's going to get the maximum possible value to recoup from Ivar as he can. And that is why he comes back and brutally destroys him on that trade deal. I don't know if a trade deal is really the right word. It's more like, I'm going to take huge quantities of very valuable things in every kind of way I possibly could think of, and a whole bunch of your men, and you also have to promise to help me out later on. As much as I enjoyed Rollo break down, I enjoyed watching him break down Ivar even more. So while Ivar heads out to try and quickly catch Lagertha before she can escape, Rollo dips out before Ivar can come back in a very angry mood. So over in England, we have a few different things culminating. One, Alfred's already making enemies of the church, which is classic, King of England thing to do. Two, we finally get to see the English kind of fight back in a very brutal and powerful way. Under King Alfred's leadership and command, they're clearly doing really well in fending off the Danes, which are just Vikings that come from Denmark rather than Sweden or Norway. And Queen Judith also brings up something very important to Alfred, that he needs an heir to secure his throne. For as long as Alfred's line of succession is open, anyone else can try kill him and then get the throne immediately afterwards. But with a strong heir and a dynasty set up, that becomes a very risky thing for anyone to try to do, as they have to challenge the entire family and all the backers they have behind it. Now this may be a little bit of an interesting plotline we get in England, and Judith will really enjoy finding some queen or princess to bring up and toss in front of Alfred, but more importantly, this points to what Ivar has as a weakness. Ivar's in a position right now where he doesn't have a wife, but also he's not able to have children, so he won't ever be able to create an heir. But if you see my preview breakdown for the next episode, which I'm linking here, I won't spoil it, but there's some pretty interesting things happening with that storyline next episode. So basically there's news this episode to set up all the major players in England before we get into the main story. With Hickman and Lagertha and stuff arriving, they'll be a big part of the storyline. Alfred will have a big conflict with the church, and we know this character will be a big part of it. We also see the kind of attitude that Alfred seems to have towards Alfred, where he's tolerating him for now, but he's not exactly happy with the situation. He also has quite a lot of charisma with his troops, as he's fighting with them, leading them well, and seen as a strong warrior. So having Uber and Bjorn and other people like that around Alfred might be the right balance he needs to try and show that he can also have strength physically and mentally. But if we want to know more about that, we're just going to have to keep watching this half season. So all the characters are kind of where they're supposed to be right now. Ivar, Harold, and Vixit and Kattegat, and their conflicting interests are going to start amplifying into some tense conflicts. The other half of the Viking world is over in England, and they're going to have to try and prove themselves and fit into that new world. So this episode really served its purpose at setting up what could be a really, really powerful season, as long as Vikings can pull off some really epic battles. Alright, tell me what you guys thought about this episode, what you hope the characters would do, what you thought about the Rollo reveal, and everything in the comment section below. If you want me to do some bonus videos about any characters or storylines or scenes, also tell me that in the comment section below. Also, my friend Azora Hype has done a review as well about this episode, so you should definitely check that out.